So I was thinking about like the future of this dance and kind of where we're at in history with it. It's getting interesting. I would say I like to make the cross reference to mixed martial arts. Right now in movement and in dance, we are at a place where we're thinking about preserving history, preserving the style, staying true to the style. But if you look at mixed martial arts has evolved to use what works. Now you can say you're a specialist in a certain style, whether it's jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai or whatever it is. You can specialize in these different styles. Like just in the beginning, there was style against style, and you had these guys from Brazil, the Gracies, come in and dominate people that were much bigger than them because of their skill in jiu-jitsu. And so that became a fundamental aspect, a foundation to what we know of mixed martial arts today. Like you cannot survive in the ring with somebody that knows jiu-jitsu and you don't. So that became the foundation of how fighters fight today. It's undeniable. Then you have elite level strikers, boxers, people that did karate. Like, so there's all these different styles coming in. At first they were facing each other, then they became it's almost like a free market system where it kind of like things got weeded out and it became survival of the fittest. Things are just gonna you're gonna use what works. And over time that evolved, and like basically the technology evolved and people started to just learn what worked. Now when in relation to dance, it's pretty similar. It seems like the difference is that there is no objective what works. There are certain things that are like I would say that are objective and that you can't really take away from dance, like things like aspects of body control. Body control is just something that we have to know to articulate music, to articulate the movement. It has to have some sort of fundamental foundation. It has to have some sort of control, some sort of organization of movement, so it's articulating something. And I mean, on the other end, you can have like disorganized movement, but it's on purpose, so you have like this purpose and this intention and this organization of your movement. So that might be the fundamental. It's kind of like jiu-jitsu is to MMA. Then you have like dime stops, like the ability to stop, the ability to create like fixed points, things like that are, I would say, fundamental, beyond like the definition of styles. So you have like things like subgenres of what people put under popping, which was like popping. You have tutting, you have waving, gliding, all this boogaloo, like all this stuff was under this term of popping, but then popping is kind of separate as well, so it's kind of confusing, and I'm not really sitting here trying to seek to define something. That, I mean, other people are passionate about that, more power to them, but I just want to like explore the idea of there's like a slight difference between mixed martial arts and dance, but so when it comes down to it, you have these different styles that are mixing together to create, like you see now hip-hop nowadays has like a a lot of crossovers from the body control of popping, and whether it's tutting, also, you know, all these different styles are starting to mix together. You're starting to get all styles competitions. That's like mixed martial arts to me. And before it was just like, you know, popping, locking, breaking. Now people are starting to incorporate them all. So, and that's because of the education factor. The ability to gain knowledge in all these styles was not possible in the past. So like if you had, it depended where you were from, whether you're from the Bronx or you're from the East Coast, you know, like in the early days, maybe you had access to breaking and rocking and hip hop, like those were your fundamentals. And then on the West Coast, you had strutting and boogaloo and popping and robot and all these sorts of things. Like maybe you had access to certain things. Now everybody has access to everything. So the future is now not limited by location. It's more limited to like your openness to learn all these different things and what you want to articulate with your movement, and what you ultimately want to express. So when it comes down to it, I feel like you know, I think it's important that we have these definitions and stuff and clear history, because I don't believe people's stories should not be heard or you know, not be part of the history books, because I think history is super important. But I think these I shouldn't say but there's this thing that's happening right now, which I see a real similarity to mixed martial arts. And I think the future, which was what I was thinking about this morning, was like the future is not going to be, you know, your access, like your technique necessarily, right? Before it was like people had privy to, based on where they were or who they knew, they were privy to like specialized knowledge, like secrets, trade secrets. And there are still those, like people still have trade secrets, but it's gonna be less and less about like who you know and where you're from, and more about how you compose your movement. Now it's about how do you creatively compose, visually express yourself. How do you take these techniques and what are you creating with them? That's, I think, for me, is the future of it, which is dope because it becomes more like an open platform. Before it was kind of like, okay, you know, you're from LA or you're from New York or you're from these major hubs, and you had access to this knowledge, and you were sessioning with these really dope people. But it's gonna soon become, there's gonna be no excuse to, you know, not know the technique, you know. So you're gonna be able to learn the technique, the foundations, and then from there it's all about how you're gonna be a composer. So I think the future is gonna be made up of composers and not just people that are able to execute like technique. It's gonna be a combination of the two. You gotta have technique, that's the guarantee. Like, and I think it's gonna be nuanced if you know the history, you know. And I think it's beneficial for sure. Like, people are gonna come back to, like, right now I think we're in a transition of people not necessarily being super clear on the history, and like the newer generation not trying to get involved in those politics. But I think it's gonna circle all back around once it all gets figured out, and there's not so much bitterness and stuff surrounding it. But just some thoughts. I think the future, it's interesting, the correlation between MMA and